Vanguard G just celebrated its 10th year anniversary, and to commemorate that, I kind of wanted to give you guys my takes with it, what my personal experiences were, and kind of talk about Vanguard G as an era as a whole. Let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below, whether or not you've actually experienced it for yourself, or whether or not you started after or extremely long after G's relevance. This is going to be kind of more of a ramble on video, and I'm not going to really have too much in the background, so if you want to kind of use this to like tap out and listen to it kind of like a podcast style, by all means do it. Seeing how, well, I'm kind of an old fart in comparison to a lot of people who've gotten into Vanguard throughout the years, so here's my takes with Cardfight Vanguard G. I think Vanguard G as a whole as a format, as just, you know, as the era went on, was a lot of fun. And this is coming from a guy who primarily played on simulators pretty much until 2016. And so when I first started playing Vanguard, a lot of people may or may not remember this from past videos, but I started primarily on simulators because I started in 2013, and I was a broke high schooler, and I didn't really have the funds to go places and build my own decks and stuff, and so my way of experiencing Vanguard for the longest time was through Cardfight area for the most part. And so I specifically remember just that huge transitional period from when the movie came out in Japan and how people were trying to figure out how Harmonix Messiah worked because no one understood how the card actually worked back then, and then they went and explained it, and eventually every single deck was able to stride just from like the base Legion decks. They just had like 2 vanillas to work with, and that's what you made work. And it even just from that, it was kind of interesting to see how certain decks developed. And then when the first waves of support started coming out for the actual clans themselves, I was genuinely hyped as a Shadow Paladin and Link Joker main in particular. I played and dabbled in a bunch of the different decks around this point, but those were my 2 main clans for the longest time. And so watching my Revengers kind of fade out of obscurity and Link Joker kind of focusing on 2 separate points, or sometimes like kind of combining different archetypes. Like the big one was like Chaos Messiah, where you used to run Alter Ego Messiah alongside of the original Chaos Breaker to kind of build a very interesting and cohesive deck to enough to a point where it was seeing some sort of results. But I was more so fixated on pure Startivators, so it was always kind of a funny thing, me and Chaos Breaker. But essentially, just my experience with G was for the first like couple years was via simulators, because that's all I had. And then when the Legend deck came out for Ren, I immediately beeline toward it. I didn't get it right away, so by the time I did finally get a large majority of the card pool, it was kind of outdated, and Luard had just come out, essentially, and so I would eventually go towards building a Diablo Luard mix, at least until GPT-14, where at that point it was like, dude, what the fuck am I doing with Diablo support at that point? Like, I might as well just commit to Luard. And so my experience with it was essentially, like, the most I would do at times was just playtest on CFA, or in the rare instances where I would play with friends online, and we would just get on random Skype calls. Remember Skype? Jeez. But yeah, that's essentially what we did. And somebody who I used to know, he primarily played Dimension Police, but the one thing I really liked about G, more so than anything else, was that you could mix and match cards from multiple different sets, multiple different eras, and build a very cohesive deck enough to a point where it's actually extremely viable. And there are a lot of clans that could just straight up do that right out the gate. In specific, Dimension Police with Dimensional Robos was just a prime example of it. You know, you could have cards from as far back as Limit Break, and even a little bit beyond that, and make a cohesive deck from all of the past, you know, D-Robo support, combined with the new stuff that would eventually come out. I specifically remember it was like a Daikaiser build in particular that my friend used to play all the damn time, and it was a blast, honestly, just playing against it, because it was just like, okay, is this man going to stride? Is this man going to, you know, break ride into a Legion? And like it was kind of just up for like chance at that point. And You know, it was, you know, and there are a lot of other decks that can do it, something similar to that. And just knowing that all these amalgamation of different mechanics and skills can be put into one deck, and then you slap a G zone to it, and it just functioned and it worked. Like, I think that's the most, like, interesting part about the early G era. Over time, however, obviously, you know, it would kind of just mesh into, you had to run a main deck. You wouldn't really run Legion or any of the older mechanics. You would just have your boss grade 3, you have your strides, and that was pretty much it. You have G guards, which that in itself was also something that I realize I kind of am just rambling. And there's going to be no cohesion whatsoever, but just bear with me. I think the anime played a much bigger role in the G era, and I think that's something that Divines is attempting to do right now, where Divines is attempting to show off busted brand new cards that come out of these new sets via the anime, like how they did back in the day. Except it doesn't work. Especially in today's era where card reveals get revealed literally right before the episode drops. I think it just kind of like ruins the experience as a whole. And if you watch the Vanguard anime now, you felt like that, like, right? Like, specifically with Liel Morta being revealed the way that it was like you got a Tuesday stream and then it's like, oh, it has a PG effect, guess we know how Akina's gonna win. That you didn't necessarily have that kind of feel. Like, yeah, they did like streams, I believe, where they would reveal card information, but it wouldn't be anything related to like you wouldn't get spoiled like that. And so one of the big moments that I remember was back during, I think it was Gears Crisis, I think it was, that fight between Misaki and Tokoha at the very end of the season. And I specifically remember she was like, okay, I have this heal trigger in hand, I'm gonna wait for my opportunity to use it. And I remember Misaki specifically setting up her board to have Silent Tom with a fuck ton of critical and a guard restrict, and Tokoha's like, yeah, no, G-guard that bitch. And a lot of us were like, what the fuck? What the hell's a G-guard? And it's just, you know, moments like that, it just brings back so many great memories. There were a lot of really good moments in Vanguard G to kind of divert from my own personal experience for a moment. I think Vanguard G is probably one of the most underrated card game anime of all time, and I don't think a lot of people give it enough credit when it's due. While I know a lot of people are more fond of the original 2011 show, and I think there are a lot of people who are really getting into Vanguard via Divines and they really love it, Vanguard G had a unique take on the card game formula, where they would use characters from the original series, from the past series, and put them into it as a kind of a supportive role to help boost up a lot of the major characters, the major players. They'll try 3, all of them. And so I remember one specific moment that made Shion probably my favorite character out of the bunch, and that was specifically that initial interaction with Kai. Now, spoiler alert, if you've never actually seen G, go watch it. It's really good. I highly recommend it. This was right around the point where Shion had pretty much lost everything. For context, he was really well off, to say the least. His parents owed a massive company. He was a rich kid. And so he made a very fatal mistake at one point where he got challenged to a card fight. It did not go well for him, and he lost everything at that moment. And so you see the absolute level of despair that's in his eyes and just his overall expression. And he feels defeated. And you feel that. And then Kai walks up to him, offers him the drink that he lost because he dropped some change and whatnot. And the two of them card fought for a good majority of that night. And you just felt the utter despair and that sudden, what the fuck am I going to do? And Kai told him straight up, get your act together, you have to man up, you have to figure this out. Kind of in his own way, where he's just like, imagine it. And meanwhile, he's beating the shit out of him with multiple Overlord forms. And I just specifically remember that point. And I loved that sudden transition from, relatively privileged person to somebody who had to really pick up himself up back off the ground. And it was really awe-inspiring seeing a character like that, you know, just make his way back up to the top to where he was before. And, you know, I always liked his overall, like, and some people may call him a Gary Sue a bit, just because of that, but I don't consider Xion a Gary Sue because he went through hell, okay? Things did not go well for him, but he eventually picked himself back up, and that same kind of personality, it didn't leave him after, it didn't leave him after, the major conflict was over and he got his life back together. It carried into G Next and GZ, where he was steadfast and, kept going with what he wanted to get done in his life. He didn't let anything get in his way. And I think that, him finally realizing he doesn't need to be so hesitant on getting things done. I can't, he's just so good of a character, honestly. Try 3 and a lot of those other supporting cast have moments like this. Tokaha kind of, being the character that has to overcome being, the baby sister to a successful card fighting brother prodigy, so on and so forth. And so, finding what she wanted to do in life after kind of always being kind of somewhat supervised by her brother at times, it was just, that was also interesting. And Chrono is kind of whatever. At times, I'm going to be honest, Chrono is kind of the weakest link out of the bunch because I think he is kind of the typical Gary Sue that you would expect, but he still lost a couple times, and a lot of times, especially early on, where he was also at that point where he really had to make a name for himself and just try to figure out and pick up his pieces and try to discover what he likes about Vanguard and get into, as he's gradually getting more involved with the game. I think Chrono is a really solid protagonist all the same. Without going into too many specifics, because I realize I've been talking about the anime for a little bit now, but Vanguard G knows what it wants to do with its main characters, its main cast, its supporting cast, and especially the villains. The villains are top notch. I'm not going to say anything about them. If you haven't seen them, definitely go check it out because there are some actual vile people in this show. But honestly, Vanguard G is just amazing, and I really think that the G anime needs to be given a lot more credit. And I realize, Arc 5 around this time was also doing something very similar. Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5 was doing something along the lines with it, where it would be alternate versions of past characters from past shows, and that was fine and all, but it was just a little weird. I'm gonna be honest with you. And so I think between the two shows, Vanguard G knows what it wants to do with its characters a bit better than Arc 5. And that's not me knocking, it's not me saying that Vanguard G is bad or anything. No, God, no. I think it's an amazing show, but it's just one of those things where if you ask me to sit down and watch the original series or the G series, I'm going to probably say G 100% of the way because I think they do their characterization and overall feel and their storytelling a lot better than the original ever could wish it did. And I know that's going to be a hot take for a lot of you boomers out there, but that's just my take, as somebody who's been playing Vanguard since 2013 onward. 11 years changes a person. But when it comes to my experience with Vanguard G, playing the actual game, like I said, I didn't really start playing the game physically until 2016. Pretty much when the Legend deck and the Luar deck would come out, and I specifically grinding the hell out of those decks and building it basically from scratch, having no context on or even cohesion and certain deck builds and stuff. I kind of just slap cards together most of the time and just see how that worked. And usually I was right on the money with stuff, but it was just fun. It was really a lot of fun and a lot of experimentation. And then, unfortunately, I didn't really get to play a lot in a lot of tournaments back then. I didn't really have the means to do so, and I didn't really have an interest back then into playing in actual official tournaments and whatnot. And then sometime later, I finally went to my first regional. It was the Springfest New York in 2018, right at the tail end of G and when V had just was about to start up. And I specifically remember kind of just winging it, right? Because I wasn't sure what to expect. I had two teams kind of set up for me just in case, because my friend was hooking me up with a team. Both of them bailed at the last minute. And so what ended up happening was at the event, I went and saw two people. Apparently they were from Texas. One of them was playing Victor. The other one was playing Silverthorn. I said, hey, you guys looking for a third teammate? They're like, yeah. Okay, let's get in line. Let's go play together. And they were just like, what do you play? I play Shadow Paladin. What do you guys play? Pale Moon. I play Nova Grappler. It's like, okay, good. Let's go. Let's get in here. And somehow I came top 32. I think we came 23rd out of like 230 something teams, which is a lot of people, especially back then, you know. So for my first regional, pretty good, and I still haven't even gotten that close in a team competition ever since. But you know, it was a lot of fun. And Vanguard G, to me, I wish I had gotten the opportunity to play in the G format a bit more, because I think I would have really loved the tournament experience a lot more if I actually committed to that kind of thing. But B kind of just completely like took over, and you know, I have more memories with V in specific than G. But if you guys want me to talk about V in the future, maybe when it gets to its 10th anniversary, who knows, I'll talk about it then. But really, Vanguard G to me had a lot of really good personal experiences that I'm always going to cherish. It was the first time I got into a physical TCG, period, because, fun fact, I dabbled in Pokemon, I dabbled in Yu-Gi-Oh! Briefly, but I never understood how the game worked. Either of those games worked, and then Vanguard kind of jumped into me and be like, okay, this looks fun, I want to play it. And so, yeah, that was my experience with, you know, getting into, you know, Vanguard physically, IRL. As someone, again, who is primarily playing on CFA, on simulators, whenever I can get my hands on it, you know, get time to do it. It was just a ton of fun, and I'm curious to see what you guys you know, how you guys may have gone through G era, or, you know, if you kind of wished you actually had played back then, you know, because I think it really is telling that Vanguard G is probably one of the golden ages for Vanguard. I know a lot of people say, like, Break Right era going into Legion was like peak for a lot of people, especially in the Japanese side of the game. But specifically for me and a lot of people, Vanguard G is where it's at. And I don't think it's very much of an exaggeration either, especially because whenever you talk to someone about playing Legacy Vanguard, like a retro format, everyone thinks Vanguard G. Some may actually want to try Break Ride, or even like Set 5 from like OG era, because, you know, you had the big three. But Vanguard G is where it's at. I feel like a lot of people, when you mention retro Vanguard, they said, play Vanguard G. Play G format. And there's a whole entire community for that now, called Project G Boot. I did a couple videos, you know, when I did a collaboration with Commander Jaime, and, you know, we played a couple games on camera, and it was a ton of fun, you know, just playing in those kind of events. Even though it was with a custom ban list, which I think is probably a lot better, because G had a lot of broken stuff back then. And so Vanguard G to me is going to be something that I'm always going to cherish. I know a lot of people are going to have a lot more to say about Vanguard G as a whole, whether they liked it or hated it, but I'm curious about your takes about it in the comment section below. And happy 10th anniversary, Vanguard G. Until next time, this is Noah, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye, everyone.